You're watching The Midlife Shift. We're going to dive into 2 curveballs that can blow up your retirement. I've got 2 experts, Rachel Lane and Stephen Huppert, here to explain how you can protect yourself. So hit the bell, like, subscribe, and follow The Midlife Shift, where we have all the juicy conversations about how to thrive after 50. Welcome, Rachel and Stephen. Now, Stephen, you're a numbers whisperer, which actually means you're an actuary. And actually, no one really knows what an actuary is. But essentially, you help make sense of risk and retirement.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's a really good way to describe it.
Yeah.
Alex.
So risk is something that's kind of ramped up in the modern world. Not all of us really understand it, and we don't really have to. But as we move towards retirement, we kind of need to get a better sense of what that is, right? And you can articulate the risks with those numbers, and instead of having numbers over here and lifestyle and risk over here, you can kind of help bring them together. Is that a good way to describe it?
And I think it's really important. And when we talk about risk, a good way to define it that I like is the risk of not achieving your goals.
Exactly.
So risk doesn't need to always be bad. We can take on risk as a positive because we can achieve certain outcomes. But it's really important to understand the risks that we're facing and how we can manage and mitigate those risks.
Because the 2 biggest risks, and we've spoken about these before, Rachel, the 2 biggest risks to disrupt the dream of retirement are really, I think you've said this, it's sort of your health and lifespan issues. So we've got this health span and lifespan stuff coming along, and obviously markets and money and how that performs. Because when you're trying to calculate life after full-time work, it gets really confusing for most people who aren't actuaries or financial advisors to work out how this all works, right?
Well, you're dealing with an unknown. So,
which is a risk.
And that is the risk, because none of us know how long we're going to have to plan for.
That's exactly right.
We call that longevity risk.
Yep.
And I describe that as the mother of all risks, because the longer you live, the more those other risks like health and markets and other things will be more relevant.
Okay.
So longevity risk, I believe, is one of the first ones you need to think about.
Okay, that's so interesting. And Rachel is an author and advisor of what I call the tricky D words. You know everything. We don't like to call it downsizing. We prefer to call it right-sizing. Correct? Because housing is actually a big pillar of Australia's retirement income system. But really, let's talk about the other D words no one likes, which is kind of dementia and disease. And you know, that's what happens as health span starts going the other way. But really, what you do is you have a lot of those tricky, awful conversations.
Where I used to. I'm not a financial advisor anymore, and there's probably very good reasons for that. So those conversations can be really taxing. Yeah.
Yeah. What? But how do we not make them taxing? How do we have an open conversation that isn't scary about the realities of the risks, right?
Yeah.
How do we do that?
That's right. And I think it's important to have those conversations early. And I think it's so important to know that a conversation about aged care, that's normally the thing that people are most frightened of.
Let's call it nursing home, right? Because everyone thinks it's a nursing home and you're lying in a bed and you know, you don't have your own independence. But that's not really what's happening anymore, is it?
No, it's not. And I think that's the thing that people need to understand is that aged care doesn't equal nursing home.
Correct.
So more than 80% of people who receive aged care services don't live in a nursing home. Right. It doesn't mean that they live in the family home. So we've also got to kind of pop that bubble that everyone's living in the family home and, you know, all of those sorts of things. They're not necessarily doing that either. A lot of them are downsizing, whether it's into
right-sizing.
A granny flat, a retirement community, whatever that might look like for them. But it's really important to know that people who are receiving aged care services, the overwhelming majority are not living in a residential aged care home.
Correct. And I think there was this other piece that we've talked about separately, which is that there are kind of 3 phases of life after work. So retirement, you know, going and playing lawn bowls or going fishing for the rest of your life, the minute you get your gold watch, that's kind of done and dusted, right? Like we're all living longer, living better, probably combining a bit of paid work, part-time work, purposeful work, volunteering, whatever it looks like for everyone, right? That everyone's different. But there's these 3 distinct phases. So I originally thought there were only 2, but Rachel kindly burst my bubble and I said there's the go-go years where you're relatively fit and healthy and suddenly you don't have to show up for a boss anymore, and you can, go caravanning around Australia, or you can take the great trip to Europe and, live the high life. And then there's the go slow years. And that's where your health might not be as good as it used to be, or maybe your mobility's impaired, whatever it might be. But then Rachel politely burst my bubble and she said there's the no-go years that no one wants to talk about, where there might be a bit of life-limiting illness, perhaps, or something else that's a bit ugly and something we don't want to think about. But talk to me, Rachel, about this belief that when we retire, we all just have this delusion that we're just going to live fantastically and then go to sleep one night and die in our sleep.
Yeah, that's right. That's the plan, isn't it, for most people?
And, it really is.
And sometimes when the topic of aged care gets brought up, people advocate very strongly for things that are just completely impossible. So my grandma was a great example, and I heard this back when I was a financial advisor. So many clients would say, well, when my time comes, just take me out in the back paddock and shoot me.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And this is common.
And I said to my grandma, I said, well, that sounds like a fantastic plan. So you're dead. I've got the guilt of killing you. And then I potentially face the rest of my life in jail for having fulfilled your wishes. Like, have you thought this through? Like, it's not helpful, it doesn't. But a lot of people are really frightened of that conversation, and they will simply say whatever they think they need to shut it down as quickly as possible.
It's true, right? So, every generation has its, black spot of conversation where they never want to go. For our parents, it was probably the topics of sex and, all that kind of stuff. But now we're talking about the black box of how we end our lives.
And
right?
that generation was very much, I don't want to be a burden.
Correct. Yep. Correct. And I interviewed Denise Drysdale, very funny lady, and she was saying she wants the Dunlop pillow whenever she requires it, is her demand for life, right? She's like, while I'm living, I say when I live, and then bring on the Dunlop pillow when it's necessary. And we do have this delusion now because we have voluntary assisted dying laws and we've come a long way in the last 10 years, but none of us really want to have this frank conversation. And talk to me, you guys specialise in this phase of life. What do you typically see when we're talking about the end of life? So go-go years, all very happy. Everyone's like, yeehaw, popping the champagne bottles, having a nice time.
Well, not necessarily, actually. There's a lot of people who get to the go-go years, and because they're so terrified of running out of money, they actually don't do the things that they should do in the go-go years because they say, well, will we have steak tonight or will we have beans on toast? Yeah. Oh, we better have beans on toast just in case.
Yeah.
So, so a lot of people, because they haven't planned and because they haven't understood their longevity risk and because they don't necessarily understand their investment risks that well, they actually don't make the most of the go-go years. The go-go years should be exactly as you described, and they should, really go. Yeah. But a lot of people don't.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And actuaries tend to call that self-insurance.
Yes.
So you're putting aside money just in case.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of bit of controversy in the superannuation industry how big a problem this is.
That's right.
But the government's put out some reports saying it is a big problem.
It is. A lot of people are actually dying with more super than they retire with.
It's ridiculous.
So,
well, because they're terrified of running out of money.
We need to help people understand the potential longevity lifespan.
Yeah.
But also we need to differentiate between lifespan and health span.
That's right. That's exactly.
We've made some great improvements in lifespan over the last 50 years. Health span's
a little bit more challenging.
So that's where we have to do a lot more investment.
And it's the health span issue that sort of is the window between go-go and go-slow, right? Like your health span is a gradual change commonly, but for some people it's really abrupt, right?
It can be very sudden.
Yes. It's a terrible diagnosis.
A fall.
A fall, and often it's having a rushed conversation in a hospital car park.
The other part of that, though, before you retire, it's also a major thing. So a significant number of Australians retire before they plan.
I have seen this with the ABS figures,
yeah,
right?
That's right. And sometimes it's through their own ill health.
Yeah.
So they can't keep working.
Isn't it? Or
a carer. Or having to become a carer for somebody else.
So for their partner or their parents.
So some of the challenge, Rachel, that you talked about of aged care, there's really a double-barreled issue there because if I'm about approaching retirement, mid-60s, it's not my own aged care I'm concerned about. It's my parents' aged care I'm concerned about.
Yep.
So,
and then you've also got the 25 or 30-year-old kids moving back home because they can't afford to buy a house. And so all of a sudden you're doing more washing than ever and cooking more meals than ever. At the same time, you're going, hang on a minute, what happened to
Where's
that
my go-go years? Where's my go-go years?
Hence the term sandwich generation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I certainly
and it's a
have
very
seen
real
that.
one.
Yeah.
And so in terms of if we talk about go-go years and go slow, just this transition, what sort of ages have you seen this move into? Because everyone's different, right?
Yeah.
But I've seen bandied around, go-go, you need to be planning pretty much from maybe 60 to 75 should be your go-go years. Is that a good ballpark or a guide? What do you think, Steve?
Well, I'll give you an actuarial answer. It
of course you will.
So, and when we come to talk a bit about life expectancy calculations and that a bit later, I'll talk about that. But the averages are useful. Yep. But you have to be very careful about the floor of averages.
The fallacy of averages.
Yes.
That's the actuarial
term,
isn't it?
That's really important. So, as a financial advisor, it's really important to start with the averages, but then take into account the personalisation.
Personalise and optimise to you, right?
Yeah.
Which is sort of what we all need to do as we move towards whatever our retirement looks like. Because mine would be different to yours, which is different to yours. And that's how it should be. Yeah. It's just that we don't really know how to have the honest conversations or the honest expectations, I think, about when's the right time, because the right time for go-go might not be the same for you as it is for me. And that's all okay as well.
And I think you've raised a really important point. It's having those conversations. So for financial advisors or superannuation funds or any of the calculators around, get across to people that it is only an average, and also get across to people that these are difficult things to think about, but you absolutely got to start thinking about. And earlier, Rachel, you said the earlier the better.
Yep.
So start engaging with people in their mid-50s, not their mid-60s.
Yeah, that's right.
That's critical too, because when you get to your mid-60s, it's all overwhelming. Because there's so many. I've got my parents in aged care. What am I going to do when I finish work? How am I going to afford this? Where am I going to live? How am I going to?
And you've talked about this risk, right? Because the biggest risk, as we identified before, is that you underspend, because then you can't make your go-go years as good as they can be, right? That's actually a big risk. Or you outlive your money. Yep. That's the other risk. And in your work, what do you typically see? Like, what's the reality for people who might be moving into the go slow years? What age is sort of happening? What sort of risks do you face if you are in the go slow years and you haven't maybe had the conversation early enough?
Well, I think there's sort of a window of time for people where they can downsize.
Right size.
And
it's a nicer word.
Housing really is pivotal to so many other decisions.
Yep.
It really will influence how much money you've got to invest or spend. It will really influence things like your age pension and rent assistance entitlements. It will impact on the means testing arrangements for your home care or residential aged care if you move in there. It will impact on your estate planning. It really, where you live really does have huge knock-on effects to your financial situation.
But most young people who can't afford to buy a house just quietly, but most young people truly believe the financial goal is just to end up owning your own home and in a mortgage-free way, which is kind of what previous generations did quite commonly. But that's much more challenging now.
And that's not a bad goal for someone who's 30.
Exactly.
That's really not a bad goal. I don't think that we necessarily need to have sort of
make that too confusing.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to kind of.
But let's talk about the housing options when you move from go-go to go-slow, because that's actually the window where you can use housing to mitigate a lot of your risks, potentially.
But you can also use housing to improve your health.
Talk to me about that.
Well, a lot of people will say before they have any care needs, they'll say, well, I'm going to stay in the family home forever and ever, amen. They can carry me out in a pine box.
With the Dunlop pillow and
right?
the rifle out the back.
But the reality is that people are not looking at their home through the glasses of somebody who needs care. So they're not looking at, and they may be saying this when they have a partner, and when the time comes that they need care, they may have lost their partner. So they're not looking at the social isolation that home can cause, which is huge. We know that social isolation in terms of health impact is as bad as smoking a packet of cigarettes a day.
Yeah.
Now, no one's smoking a packet of cigarettes going, this is good for my health.
No.
But no one seems to be that concerned about social isolation and the impact it can have on your health. It really should be a concern for people. So there's that. Then there's also the physical environment. So very few homes built for the delivery
aging
of
in
care.
place. And aging in
Correct.
place is this sort of mythical thing that we all delude ourselves that our home is going to let us do, right?
So why not use some of the value in your home to modify it to age in place?
So you can definitely do that. But you can also, there's now a whole range of new financial type products where you can use your home equity in different ways, shapes and forms to maintain the go-go years just that bit longer, right?
But with my, money hat on,
because you're good at that.
There's a couple of things to think about with that. So the first thing is, not every home modification is possible.
Yes.
So in some cases, doors can't be made any wider than they are, or hallways can't be made any wider, or bathrooms can't be made any more accessible. But the other thing is it won't necessarily overcome the social isolation issue.
That's true.
And then thirdly, which is the big money thing that no one ever seems to think about with this, is sure, you access $100,000 to modify your home.
Yep.
What have you done to the value of your home? Assuming the next person doesn't want
grab rails
and ramps and all of those things that
all
make
the great ugliness of aging in place.
Right, you've actually devalued the property because through the eyes of someone who doesn't need those things, those things are actually liabilities. They're things that they're going to have to pay to fix.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I think people need to be aware of. It is not just the cost of doing those things.
Yep.
It is also the impact that it has on the value of the asset when you go to sell it. Now, if that home's going to go under a bulldozer no matter what, then it doesn't matter. But if that home has a value, you have pulled the value of that home down potentially.
I think the point that you've really highlighted there, Rachel, and that'll probably come through a lot of our conversation, it's about understanding the pros and cons.
Yeah.
There's no silver bullet here.
That's right.
That's it.
And a lot of people talk about how do I optimize? And my response is there's no such thing as optimization. There's trade-offs.
Yeah.
And when we get to talk about different products in retirement, there are trade-offs. When we talk about what are you going to do with your house, where you're going to live, there are trade-offs. I mean, on the social isolation, I absolutely agree that loneliness is one of the biggest.
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it really is.
If you're still relatively mobile and can get out and about a little bit, staying in your home means you're in the same neighbourhood.
Yeah.
So
where you
again,
have connections.
There's trade-offs.
Well, do you? Because a lot of the stories I hear are that the neighbours, the older people in the neighbourhood don't know the younger people in the neighbourhood. They drive into the garage, the roller door comes down, and they never see them. They never speak to them. It doesn't have that same community.
So let's talk about some of the housing options, because I think most of us just think you have to have a mortgage-free home and that's the option, and then you go into a nursing home, which is all wrong. No, that's not the truth, right? There's only 200,000 or so residential aged care places in Australia. A lot of reform and changes in that system, which we can maybe get to a bit later. But the reality is we don't go from our house into a nursing home anymore. That's the minority of people will do that. And the people that do need to go into residential aged care, they often actually need to be in residential aged care, right?
Yeah, and I don't think we want to demonise residential aged care because a lot of particularly the new aged care homes are far more like a 6-star hotel than they are whatever the visual image people have got listening to this and thinking about the words nursing home, whatever they're picturing is probably very, very different to what's on offer.
So let's talk about those housing options though. So when you don't have to own your own home anymore and you might have stairs and maybe you can't walk up the stairs the same way you used to, and your bathroom can't be modified to have someone come in and help you in the bathroom. What other options? So we've talked about retirement communities, land lease communities, granny flats. Talk me through those options and how they work in Australia.
Well, a colleague of mine recently retired, and he moved out of his multi-acre place into a retirement community.
Yep.
I think is the right. I'm not sure even what the right term is for that.
None of us have words anymore.
But they've got their own house, but they're part of a community. He's got involved in activities. Every time I speak to him, he's having a ball.
Yeah, exactly.
He's been voted on the committee now, and
of course
all of that sort of stuff.
Because they're kind of like Melrose Place for the go-go years.
Coming back to the social isolation, he and his wife are so well connected now.
That's great.
But you've got to make an effort.
Yeah.
I've got another colleague who's retired down to his where he had his holiday place down at
so the tree
Torquay,
change or sea change.
And he was saying to me not long after he moved in, it's so different from when I was there as a vacationer,
as a weekender,
and he's had to again. He and his wife have made a real effort to join the local bridge club, the local men's shed, and all of that.
All that stuff.
And he's thriving.
But Rachel explained that the tree change and sea change vision that many Australians have, and they think that's going to be their go-go years. We're going to go to the great beach house that we adore and have had many great holidays with, but it actually isn't always as good as people seem to think, right? Talk me through the issues.
I think it is important for people, if they're thinking about making a tree change or a sea change, to visit those places at other times of the year.
That's right.
Because places that are beautiful at the peak of summer
very empty during the week
may not be what you're looking for. In the depths of winter.
And the people you see there during the summer that you've maybe play golf with or whatever aren't there.
Yeah.
Is the local community a community you want to be part of? But again, it's going into it with open eyes. It's understanding the pros and cons.
And how expensive is it to unravel a tree change or sea change?
It can be very expensive to unravel. And one of the big things that people don't factor in is that when you move, so sometimes people think about the property market as being this homogenous, singular market.
That always makes money.
Of course, absolutely, yes.
Like endlessly printing checks for people.
That's right. And it all goes up at the same rate.
Yeah.
Whereas in reality, the property market is fragmented as,
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
As any other market.
Think about it. Think about your house and think about what your house might be worth 5 kilometres down the road. And then you understand, well, hang on a minute, that's not the same. So sometimes what you'll see is in these regional or far-flung places that are very beautiful and picturesque, the property market doesn't move in line with capital cities. And so you can get a situation where you've moved there, and then when you want to move back, that your house hasn't kept pace with houses in the market that you want to move back to, and you're priced out of that market.
And there's also an issue because in tree change and sea change areas, it takes a lot longer to sell a house.
It can.
And typically, if you are looking at one of those health crisis moments, which is often why you might need to sell or change where you live, you need to do something fairly quickly sometimes.
And the other aspect that you mentioned, health, if you've been living in the suburbs or your medical support, your specialist, your GP are all part of your community, and you suddenly pick yourself up and go somewhere else, do you keep on coming back to Melbourne for your specialist visit? Do you try and find someone more locally? Is there a regional town in the area that might have the hospital services you need? So again, it's a very broad range of issues to consider.
And some people plan to retire, and you've probably heard about this, and they intend to live on a cruise ship.
Yes. Oh, yes. There's actually a few people that do that.
Yes.
And I remember being on a cruise ship many years ago now, 3-generation trip it was. My mum, my grandmother and myself, one cabin. Anyway,
nice.
I still have an eye twitch whenever I talk about it, but it was a lot of fun. But there was someone who had a medical episode, and I remember it took them 2.5 hours to get a helicopter out to the ship,
the cruise ship,
and medivac them. And I thought, gee, you really don't want to need emergency
on a cruise ship.
So if that's your plan, that's all right, as long as you understand. Coming back to the thing about risks, as long as you understand,
the risk is that if you have a heart attack,
there is a serious risk that you may not be able to get medical attention in time should you need it.
Those cruise ships have morgues on board for a reason.
I know. No, they do.
It's true.
Because, so funny story, My grandmother celebrated her birthday while we were on the cruise ship, and they brought out the birthday cake, and it said, "Happy birthday, Lorna." And my grandma's name was Jean. So we said, but being all, we were all excited.
Didn't want to
and so we were like, well, we'll take the cake to Lorna and we'll all sing happy birthday to Lorna. Then we'll come back to our table and we'll sing happy birthday to Jean.
And the waiter was like, story already.
Yeah.
No,
don't talk about
and I had to have a quiet word to him on the side. I said, what's going on? He goes, Lorna's dead.
Oh,
I went, okay.
That'll burst your cruise ship go-go years dream, right?
Yeah.
But there's this other dream.
But that's when I found out they have morgues on board.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's quite alarming, isn't it? But the other retirement bubble that a lot of people, especially in their 50s, have this dream about when they're, sitting back having a champagne with their friends. They're like, let's all buy some acreage.
Oh, Lord.
And we'll share a
what
nurse.
Could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Yes. And a cleaner.
Yeah.
And,
we'll get all the help we need. And we'll just do it together. Won't it be great?
Oh, it will be wonderful.
So can you talk about how that bubble needs to be burst before you go too far down the track of dreaming it?
Well, look, no, I've actually got a really great example of that in the book called The Shedders.
Okay.
And so there are lots of people who have that dream, and there are some who go through with it.
Yeah, that's right.
But there are a lot of things to think about. So things to think about is...
A lot of risks, right?
Well, that's a really important point. But the way you've phrased it is slightly different. A lot of things to think about. So you don't have to use the word risk when you're having the conversation. I mean, I'm happy to use it, but some people are a bit frightened by considerations or what could go wrong here.
Exactly.
And if that went, what's the worst case that might happen?
Ultimately, what you're doing is you're establishing a contract with all of those people that you're
having
living
fantasy
with.
About.
Right?
Yep.
So you need to think about things like, well, what happens if one person became ill? What happens if one person passes away? What if one couple want to get out of that arrangement? Can they sell their portion to somebody else? Can they leave that in their will to their children?
Yeah.
Or because sometimes people don't think about this, and then when that happens, when someone the kids go, but hang on a minute, Mum and Dad had this interest, and
I want my inheritance.
They've left it to us, and it's like, oh yes, well you'll get that when the last one of us shuffles off.
Yeah.
Now that could be decades away.
Hot pillows.
So.
Wow.
It really can cause a lot of issues.
Yeah. And what you've just described there is a risk management process.
Yeah.
So it is so understand what could go right, what could go wrong.
Yeah.
If this happened, how would I respond?
Yeah.
Then you're able to make an informed decision, and you might decide after all of that, actually, I love these couples so much, we're still going to do it
anyway.
But we know what could go wrong and we're ready for it.
The far more common example of that is granny flat arrangements.
Yes, so let's talk about granny flat arrangements because they're very interesting, right?
Oh, it's great, right? The kids sit there and they go, oh, this is great. Mum's moving in. We've got a live-in babysitter. Yeah. You book the restaurant, right? Let's go Saturday night. So, and Mum thinks, well, clearly I'm up for the Mother of the Year award because my kids want to look after me forever and ever. Amen. Right? And at some point, those expectations are going to clash. So you need to have, and one of the things that people don't know about granny flat arrangements is that they can be subject to capital gains tax.
Yes, correct.
And it can be considered what's called a D1 CGT event.
A D1 CGT event.
You're the actuary. You're not across these ones.
Not across that one.
No. So a D1 CGT event is when you're considered to have both purchased and disposed of an asset on the same day. So the problem with that is that most of us are used to dealing with capital gains tax on assets that we've held for more than 12 months.
Yep.
So we get the 50% discount. This, you're considered to have bought it and sold it the same day. There is no 50% discount. So all of it can be subject to CGT. So normally when people find out about this, it's the children.
Yep.
They're doing their tax return. And all of a sudden, there's an extra $300,000 in their taxable income for the year because of the granny flat arrangement they set up with Mum. And everyone has that face.
And it's the kids that have to pay it. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's expensive babysitting.
Yeah, right. So one of the good things
Mum, here's the bill.
That the ATO have created a set of criteria for having a CGT exemption for your granny flat arrangement because this was catching people by surprise. And part of that criteria is that you must have a written agreement.
Okay.
So that solves a lot of the problems to do with granny flat arrangements, because historically people didn't have any
contract.
because you don't have a contract with family, right? But guess what? No one looks at a contract until this whole thing turns
Blows
to cat
up.
litter.
Yeah.
And
That's
then,
when you need your contract.
then they're reaching for the bottom drawer going, hang on a second, what are my rights? What are my responsibilities here? So it's really important. And we've got a checklist in the book that talks about what are the things you need to think about. So think about what happens if the kids get sick? What happens if the kids get divorced?
Yeah, that's a big thing too, isn't it?
Is there a mortgage on the property? What happens if the kids default on their mortgage? What happens if mum needs aged care? You know, who does what? Who pays for what? It can be little things like the water bill, and it can be huge things like mum needing help to have a shower.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And
totally.
Reasonable things like the kids might want to go on holidays once a year. That's not unreasonable. But if you haven't thought about it and thought about, well, what happens under those circumstances? Because this is more than just a Sunday roast. People think that this is, you know, just like when mum comes over for Sunday roast. And it's not like that. And it's a completely different dynamic.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because they're
completely different
in the backyard all the time, right?
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, a granny flat arrangement can be anything. It doesn't even have to be a separate
dwelling.
Yeah. No, and in fact, a lot of the granny flat arrangements that I've seen are where kids move in with mum and mum transfers the house to the kids for a granny flat right to keep living there.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah, a lot of the time there actually is no construction of anything. It's just the transfer of a property.
So it's just the name for this kind of arrangement. And the other thing I wanted to raise, and I want to get onto lifespan and health span stuff, but you talked about collaborative housing as well. So we talked about the dream of living with your friends, but there's a lot of new collaborative housing type arrangements springing up, especially in cities like Melbourne and Sydney, probably Brisbane as well. Talk to me about what they mean and what they are.
Well, collaborative housing, I guess we used to call it hippie communes. And we can't call it that anymore because they've gone vertical like every other form of housing.
They're high-rise hippie communes.
That's right.
With a green wall.
But that's right.
And a rooftop garden with
chickens
on the roof.
But still the same concept where you have a small living space of your own, so bedroom, lounge room, perhaps a small kitchenette, and then you share dining spaces, you share laundry spaces, you share kitchens, you share
outdoor
gardens.
Areas.
A lot of them share bikes, cars, gardening tools. So it's the same concept, but
so it's a different type of retirement community, isn't it? A collaborative housing.
And what you've got to think about is this what I want?
Yep.
Do I want to have this level of engagement
with everyone? With.
In some cases, you can't just sell that home to anyone you want.
There's an approval.
Of course, because that's what makes the community.
Yeah, so what this highlights is we are going to see more and more innovation coming into this space. I know in some of the university towns in the US, for example, retired academic staff can stay on in there, but have some sort of volunteering.
In their office?
Well, in their in their residential.
They can turn their office into a house.
There'll be residences on campus,
so
they can stay on.
One of the dormitories.
Yeah, so they can stay on, or there will be some housing not far away, but it's owned by the university, and I can't remember the exact details, but part of the arrangement is they do tutoring and volunteer stuff for. So again,
that's quite nice,
it's trying to come up with different
innovative
ways and saying, you know, there's no one size fits all, and we need to use a little bit of lateral thinking. The hippie type communes might work for some. The joint community, you know, the buying together might. The tree chains might be good for others. Granny flats. It's not one size fits all.
No, it's not.
And also, you know, we've talked a lot about as you age, your ability, your activities change. Your housing environments will change.
That's
what's good now for the next 5 years or 10 years may gradually or suddenly be very, very different when you get to 80.
That's exactly right. And let's talk a little bit about this lifespan and health span stuff. So at Citro, we talk a lot about using the retirement calculators to help sort of accumulate your way to retirement and work out what your number might be, right? Which is a very different phase of financial planning to what you need to do after you've accumulated, when we're talking go slow, and maybe no go.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about the lifespan and health span calculators, because, Stephen, I know I've asked you about these before, and you've got a couple of good ones or better than average ones, because you can Google your way to anything with these calculators.
And statistically, you never die. So that's the silver lining in all of this.
If only that was the truth, and you didn't have to pay for it.
No, I'll flip it on its head a bit, what you're saying. Statistically, everybody's got 100% probability of dying.
Yeah, that's okay. That's an actual
But on
comment.
the longevity table.
So, there's a couple of things with the calculators of what you're talking about. First of all, let's think about the calculators that will project how much you need.
Yes.
Or what lump sum will I have when I retire.
The financial retirement calculators.
There's some real challenges I have with them. First of all, if all they do is present a lump sum at retirement, so if I'm a 45-year-old and it tells me I'm going to have, and especially if people start work today, they're going to be receiving 12% for life.
That's right.
So that's a significant contribution into their superannuation fund. So I might be a 45-year-old. It tells me I'll have $1.2 million when I retire. What does that mean?
It means nothing when you're 27, right? You've got no concept.
I don't know. I don't care what my lump sum is. I want to know what my income will be.
And what can I buy with that income?
That's right. So the first thing is, and unfortunately not enough superannuation funds put income projections on, you'll get your annual statement each year and it'll probably tell you what your projected retirement balance is.
Yeah.
They should be putting on what your projected income is.
Because that would help people picture it better, wouldn't it?
That's right.
And
that's right.
That's all it is. It's about helping people bring it to life so they can start having the conversations earlier about the reality and
the illustrations of that.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. Then when I get to retirement and I start trying to plan, well, okay, I've got my money.
Yeah.
How am I going to spend it? How long will it last? And that's the really big question. And there's two. How long will it last is one.
Yeah.
But how confident do you want to be that your plan will last as long as you do is another one. And it comes down to the level of confidence. And again, some of these terms that we use, like probability, statistics, levels of confidence, aren't intuitive.
No, they're not.
We don't do enough to teach those sorts of concepts at school. So we and
picture it.
One of the problems is that we use all those terms in our calculators, and the average person looking at it, what does it mean?
Well, there's the fallacy of averages again, right, Steve?
Correct.
And if we talk about lifespan and life tables, so Stephen sort of blew my mind when he explained that life tables and mortality risk is not the same as like the average age that people live to. And I went, oh, hang on, because we know, women live longer than men, blah, blah, blah.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
If you're walking along through having a bit of a hike through the bush and you come to a river and the sign says average depth 80 centimetres. You think, oh, well, I could walk through that. Average depth is 80 centimetres. It doesn't tell you that there's a 3-metre hole in the middle.
Where the current's running really fast to sweep you away.
So if that's absurd, picking up a life table and saying, if you Googled now,
I'm going to live till 92.
If you Google average life expectancy in Australia, you'll probably get a number, say 82.
Yeah.
Or 85.
82 to 86.
Well, first of all, that number will be average life expectancy at birth.
Okay.
And
the older you get, the longer you're gonna. Yeah,
that's right.
You told me about this.
I just did an article on that a couple of days ago, actually, because it's important to remember that we need not average life expectancy at birth, but average life expectancy for a 65-year-old.
And this is where the numbers are really interesting, because if you're a 65-year-old woman, so Citro's largely a female readership, you have a 50% chance, if you're 65 today, you have a 50% chance of living to 91 is kind of what your chart previously told me.
And I'll put some caveats on that number as well, which we have to do.
True.
Because that's based on the Australian life tables that get published by the Australian Government Actuary every 5 years, and they're based on numbers that have happened in the past.
It's a lagging
So they're based on
indicator.
looking backwards.
Yeah.
So whenever you're using a calculator, one of the key takeaways, and I remember we talked about this when we spoke, have a look at the assumptions.
Yes,
correct.
Absolutely.
What are they doing? Are they just using the Australian life tables average? And if they are, walk away from that. Don't use that. When the government actually puts out the life tables every 5 years, he'll also do some calculations about improvements.
Yes.
So some of the calculators will use not the average life tables as they are, but the average life tables adjusted for improvement factors.
Okay.
So is this like when you get your council rates notice and it says your home value is this, but the improved value is that?
It's a little bit like that. So again,
like
you
that.
need to look at the fine print on a calculator.
And understand it.
And if you don't understand it, ask.
Yeah, or Google
it is critical.
And don't ask ChatGPT, maybe.
And don't,
but there are good longevity
there
calculators
are some around.
out there.
So what can you search for a good longevity calculator?
So depending on what you're after, the Optimum Pensions Lifespan Calculator, which I'm involved a bit with, what that will do, it won't look at money at all, but it looks at you as an individual, asks you a handful of health lifestyle questions.
Because if you smoke, you're probably not going to live as long as someone who does.
Based on actuarial data, we'll work out what that will mean for your expected future lifespan.
And this is the issue, right? Because when you're doing the financial planning of retirement, you kind of need to know what's your go-go versus go-slow window.
And then
into no-go.
Coming back, you use the number 91 as a 50%.
Yeah, chance.
So 50% of women will...
Age 65.
Will live...
to 91.
Or beyond.
And 25% will live to 96.
But flip that round and say, if I plan to live to 91, so if I do all my calculations and I can spend X amount a year because I'm going to live to 91, there's a 50% chance you'll live longer than that and your plan will fail.
I'll run out of money.
And so people might say to me, we want to be 100% sure. Okay, plan to 105.
Yeah. And I think we looked at the Mercer calculator when we were talking, which is the one that does, it shows you the longest. Yeah. So it's probably the only one on the Australian market that does go all the way.
However, I might be, I don't need to be 100% confident. I'd be quite comfortable being 80% confident. So what age should I plan for if I want to be 80% confident?
So what age should you plan for, guys? We need answers because not all of us are as good with numbers as you are.
If you mentioned the number of 91 for 50%, for that same 65-year-old woman, if I choose 96, then there's a 75% chance. So there's only a 25% chance I'll outlive my plan.
Okay.
And I might say, 25% chance, 1 in 4. Do I want that or not?
Take that bet.
No, I'd rather be more comfortable. So then I might say, I need to plan for 99 to be...
10% of us are going to live to 99 or beyond.
But there's trade-offs.
Of course there are.
So then you don't spend as much money
in the go-go years.
That's
and
right.
this is the problem.
Or you consider a financial product that will guarantee an income for life.
Now we're going to talk about that.
And that's an alternative.
So a lot of people don't. They just think you get this magical number and you look at this thing that we've called the As for Retirement standard before, this sort of one size fits all. It's a blunt tool, but it helps people understand what to spend. But talk to me about your concerns about the As for Retirement standard, because it's worth understanding what that retirement standard really means, and not a lot of us really do, right?
And most superannuation funds and many financial advisors will use it.
Yep.
So the question is, how do I measure how well I'll live in retirement? And there's a number of different ways of doing it. Okay. One could be what we call a replacement rate. Okay. I'd like to live on 60% of what I was earning while I was working.
Okay.
Your expenses are lower, etc. So one of the ways we'll do it is say, let's work out what a nice replacement rate might be. 60%, 70%, whatever. Another one is do it reverse and work out a budget and say, here's what I think I'll spend.
But budgets are very difficult.
And what ASFA's done, though, is helped you with that.
That's right. And that's what that tool does.
That's right.
So just to clarify, the retirement standard currently says by age 67, a couple might need 690K as their super number.
Step back from that.
Okay.
The first thing they say is not you'll need 690K, it's how much per year you need.
That's right. So
that should be your starting point.
A couple needs 74,000 a year and a single needs 52,000 a year for the comfortable lifestyle. Correct. So there's the comfortable and modest.
So what ASFA does
modest, though,
is have a bit like what they do with CPI. Yeah, they have a whole basket of goods.
That's right.
And every quarter they'll review the cost of those goods and services and say, at the moment, it's 69,000 or whatever number you said.
74,000 for a couple, 52,000 for a single.
It's important to understand what's in those bucket of goods.
Exactly right.
Is it my lifestyle?
And does it match you? How many haircuts are in that? Because they actually do have haircuts
or
in the
new
retirement
cars,
standard.
or
and travel.
visiting my grandchildren in the UK, and
How
all
often
of
do I
those
go
sort
to
of
a
things.
cinema? How often
So
do
that's the first thing, but it's a really, really useful starting point.
Yeah.
The other criticism of the ASFA standard until now has been that it doesn't include cost of housing. It assumed that you had a...
But if you've paid off your house, then it's free from there.
That's right.
You don't need a new roof. You
But
don't need to replace your
You don't
gutters.
even have to pay rates or insurance.
No, that was included in the... That's included.
That was,
So,
but your gutters weren't.
But to give credit to ASFA,
No, it's a good tool.
they've released a new version just recently that has actually two standards. One if you're renting, and one if you
own your own
home.
Mortgage
so that's a really good start. So absolutely use that as a guide. So again, don't just use one number. So look at a replacement rate. 60%, 70% of my income. Then I'll look at the ASFA numbers and see what they say, and then I'll come up with a number that's relevant for me.
And the new renting number that ASFA suggests is that if you're a couple who are going to rent and you are comfortable with what's called the modest lifestyle, which is very bare bones, not a lot of private health insurance, not a lot of haircuts, definitely not a lot of travel, you will need $385,000 as a couple or $340,000 as a single. So you can sort of see this.
But I'll pick you up again.
Yeah.
Start with the income amount.
So they don't have that.
And that's
for retirement
standard
for this.
that's an issue.
Yeah,
because to talk lump sums can be very misleading.
Yeah.
Because we don't know how long are they planning for,
That's
what
right.
products are used,
That's right.
what assumptions
What's
have
the rate
been
of return?
used, all of that. So
Those things that make my number.
But so that would be one of my very important recommendation. Look at annual income.
And let's talk a little bit about the products, because this is the other weird thing about, everyday people sort of trying to think 20 years into the future with this mythical thing called superannuation and an age pension and all this kind of blow your brains out number crunching. There's different types of financial products that can deliver you that income, right?
Yeah.
So we've talked about account-based pensions, which is where your $690,000 lump sum will turn into an annual income, which will gradually, and this is the other thing most Australians don't understand, the age pension might come into play as well, and the concessions that come with that might come into play, or they might not, which could leave you in a very different position at 91 to someone who is on the age pension and qualifying for everything.
So there's two parts of that. So let's focus on the narrow superannuation bit, and then we'll expand that.
Okay.
A lot of people don't understand their options when they retire with their super fund. Most super funds in Australia will only offer you two options: 100% lump sum, or an account-based pension, or a mixture of the two.
Okay.
An account-based pension is a drawdown product, so it transfers the money from your accumulation phase into what we call the account-based pension phase.
Yep.
There's tax advantages of doing that because the income earned on that is taxed at zero.
Yep.
And one of the things that we've seen in the data, a lot of people stay in what's called the accumulation phase, which is not tax-free, even though they're retired. So they're leaving money on the table. So that's the first thing, because they just don't know.
They don't know.
They don't know.
And that's why you need financial advisors who specialise in a different phase of things.
Or superannuation funds.
I was going to say, exactly.
Or doing the right
the
guidance.
Superannuation fund just needs to do the best thing
a bit
by
of
its
nudging.
members.
By the way, we see you've turned this age.
Always do, right?
Here's the options you've got.
They don't always do that. Why do you think they don't do that at the moment?
I could go with. That's a huge conversation.
That's a whole other podcast.
So they're the two choices.
Okay.
I was speaking to an actuary in Canada a couple of days ago, and she was aghast that you actually take 100% lump sum.
Oh, really?
A lot of countries you can't do that.
Wow.
They only
because it's there to provide for your retirement.
That's right.
Yeah, to stop you bludging off the state, right? That's the idea, isn't it?
So superannuation is designed to complement the age pension.
That's right.
And the intergenerational report that came out a few years ago shows it's doing a good job.
Yeah.
So the cost of the age pension is projected to decrease to the government.
But then,
per person,
yes,
but not globally.
No.
The actual cost of the pension. So there are more part pensioners than full pensioners.
Correct. Yes.
But the actual cost of the age pension is not going down.
No, correct.
Because of the baby boomers, basically.
So the first thing is they're the only choices most super funds offer you. And remember, an account-based pension could run out
Yes,
before
that's right.
you're ready.
That's exactly right.
Or the other thing that happens that we talked about earlier, because you might get good investment returns, you could actually have more
money
or the same, similar amounts when you die, even though you've been taking out the minimum at 4%. And the evidence is most people take out the minimum, either they think it's been a recommendation, or
they falsely believe,
or they're worried about running out.
It's so confusing. So let's talk about those, what I was calling them annuity-style products.
Yeah, and that's not a bad way. So there's a whole range of innovative retirement products that have become available in Australia in the last 5 or 6 years.
And they can hedge against this longevity risk, right?
So there's always been products that could hedge against longevity risk, but they're the traditional annuity, which are very much locked into prevailing interest rates when you purchase it.
Yes, and they used to be terrible products, as you said. Yeah, they didn't beat inflation, and most people would just go, "What?"
Well, you're locking in.
You're locking
in an interest rate
at the time you buy it.
At the time that you buy it, and so obviously when interest rates go up, you're not getting the benefit of that. Of course, you're protected from the downside.
That's right.
Over the last sort of 10 or so years, interest rates haven't been particularly high, unlike people who bought their
in the last year
in the 80s, or
in the 80s,
and some of them are still getting 17%.
Oh my gosh, imagine what a dream that'd be. It's like a lottery.
You mentioned inflation. Yeah. You can buy them CPI linked.
Yes.
So that's not so. There's always features in the products that can mitigate some of those risks.
And is it good financial advisors that you need to seek advice about these from? Who do you go to if the super fund isn't doing a good enough job?
So there's two parts to that.
Where do you go?
So what we've seen is a whole lot of new products being launched.
Correct.
By mostly life insurance companies, but a couple of super funds. Yeah. And these could be called lifetime income products, investment-linked annuities. One of the big challenges is the naming convention, and globally there's a whole lot of weird names that are used for these products. But fundamentally, these new products that have launched in the last 5 or 6 years, we describe them as unbundling investment risk and longevity risk. So when you bundle them together, the life insurance company needs to be very cautious about the money they've guaranteed to you, and they've got to hold a lot of capital to support that guarantee. So they're quite expensive products.
Okay.
If you unbundle, and so these new products only protect against longevity.
Okay.
Not investment market risk.
So, and
that's the great decoupling.
But you can choose how much of risk or not risk you want on the investment component.
Oh.
So they're quite complex.
Yeah,
a couple of the life insurance companies that offer them will only offer them through a financial advisor.
Oh, okay.
But a couple of super funds now offer them either with or some without an advisor, but with sort of guidance tools. And we're seeing a lot of super funds have flagged that over the next 4 to 5 years, there'll be more of these products available, partly because the regulator saying to super funds, you've got to do more about helping retirees. Yep. You've got to do a better job. And that's been a constant call.
All right. So I'm going to try and wrap this up now. I want each of you to think about the one thing someone in their 50s should be thinking about today for their retirement for the future. Just one thing. What would you say that is?
Start planning early.
But I took mine.
No, and understanding that retirement is not one dimension.
And you've talked about this because you're saying you need to, even when you get there, you need to review it every couple of years.
100%. Because circumstances change. So it's something that's really hard to boil down to one thing apart from plan, and it's multidimensional.
And get good advice.
There's health, there's housing, there's financial, there's physical. I mean, all those dimensions are important.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so hard.
Get advice. And that doesn't need to be financial advice, which costs you $5,000. There are different ways. So it could be retirement coaches. It could be aged care specialists. It could be your super fund. Super funds are getting better at offering guidance.
And there is a way now, and I checked this with ASFA, you can actually ask your super fund, whether it's like a regular old regulated fund like an Aware or Australian Retirement Trust or whatever, you can get specialist financial advice or personalised financial advice, because I know I'm going to ruin the words and you've already, whatever we want to call it, but you can get the personalised financial advice and it can be deducted from your balance before you've reached the requirement.
Sure, but you're still paying for it.
You're still paying for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
you're not paying for it out of your today's
No.
money that you're trying to earn money with.
Well, you're paying it out of your super fund.
That's correct.
So that's no longer earning money in your super fund. Sometimes people think that
I
money
know.
in super's free.
Yeah, I know.
And it's
true.
still money that you
Yeah.
spend. I think the trick with financial advice is to ask not what is the price of the advice, but what is the value of the advice.
Okay.
So if I'm going to pay $5,000 for advice, what value am I going to get from that advice? And the easiest way to do that is to compare that advice with what you would have done had you not got advice.
Okay.
What I call the
interesting.
do nothing scenario. And that way the financial advisor should be able to show you that you are far better off than the advice fee itself by taking the advice, because financial advice is about more than choosing investments. It's also about how do you structure it, how much do you put into a lifetime income stream, how much do you keep in your account-based pension, how much do you keep in your own investments, how does that impact on your age pension? There's there's so many different facets to it, but that is where I would start, because sometimes people get very hung up on the cost.
That's
financial
That's
advice.
important.
Don't get hung up on that. Get hung up on the value of that advice.
That's so interesting.
And coming back to what are the one or two key things.
I love how you've doubled that.
He's an actuary
It's good,
after
isn't
all. It's a risk.
If I'm looking at it from the other side, from the financial advisor or from a super fund perspective, what are people approaching retirement looking for?
Yeah.
And I think what they're looking for is confidence and knowing they'll be okay.
I totally
and
agree
so
with you.
that is critical in that relationship, whether that relationship's with a super fund or a financial advisor. The key item, it's not about optimizing. It's not about focusing on wealth only. It's, am I confident that I'll be okay?
That's exactly right. And interestingly, with the 12,000 people who've just lost superannuation in the First Guardian and Shield collapse, I mean, it's a terrible tragedy for those people. But what does that really mean for our Australian super system?
Yeah.
Are things going to change?
So, I mean, on that, it is tragic.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly the root cause yet. There's a lot of there's a mixture of negligence and fraud and misconduct on different parties. It's only a small number. I know if I'm one of the, if you're
one of the 12,000,
if it's only one person, that one person
happy.
that's tragic. So I agree.
And I think the number, it's more than $1 billion.
Yeah,
I mean,
a lot of money.
Yeah.
The Australian superannuation system is pretty robust.
Okay.
So if you're and these people were slightly on the margins because they were doing things, probably not realising what they were doing, which were riskier.
Because they weren't in regulated super funds, they were in self-managed super funds.
No, even regulated funds, but then the investments were off in non-superannuation products. It gets quite technical.
Oh, okay.
So, but for the 99% of Australians that are in large regulated super funds, the industry funds, the big retail funds, it's an incredibly robust system.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's very hard to legislate against misconduct and fraud.
Correct. And what's your one thing that someone in their 50s today that I know Stephen pinched it? What should they take away?
Look, I don't think realistically anyone in their 50s is planning for what their 90s are going to look like. I think it's important that you have a plan for each chapter.
Yeah,
okay.
And make sure that plan is going to help you achieve what your objectives are. So if it's in your go-go years, make sure you've got a plan that enables you to go-go.
Yeah.
Understanding that you're going to need money at the end of that for your go slow and your no-go. So make sure that you've got a plan that you can revise as need be. And I think one of the big mistakes a lot of retirees make that I see is that they are frightened of market volatility.
Well, it's scary, right?
I get it. And they retire, but it's almost like they retire and they think that death is imminent.
Yes.
Right. And the reality is that they retire and their money, their savings, whether it's superannuation, investment, whatever it might be, they're probably going to have to work for them for another 20, 30, 40 years.
Absolutely.
So if you rush to defensive assets, and sometimes when I say this, people say, oh, we should all go out and buy shares. That's not what I'm saying, right? But I'm just saying, if you rush to put all of your money into defensive assets like cash and fixed interest over 20 or 30 or 40 years will not be your best friend.
Okay.
So you've got to think about what are your investments? What is your appetite for risk? Make sure that you have money there for when markets go down, because guess what?
They will.
Markets go down. Even the property market goes down. No one wants to hear about it, but it's true, right? Markets go up and markets go down. That's just the reality of markets. So make sure you have money set aside so that you're not having to crystallise those losses.
Yep.
And then have a plan that you can review and make sure that it is achieving what you want it to achieve at each chapter.
I really like that. Have a plan and review it regularly.
Yeah,
If you're looking for something concise.
Okay. And that'll give you more confidence.
Yeah.
That's our joint statement. Our joint statement, have a plan and review it regularly.
That's right.
We came up with an answer.
Yeah. That's all that matters. As long as there's one that gives you confidence, that's what matters. And that's a wrap from the Midlife Shift. Thank you, Stephen and Rachel.
Pleasure.